February. Now, all this week we have been looking into the complicated issues surrounding why animals become threatened and endangered in the wild or even go extinct. And we've also been having a look at some of the different easy ways that we can make little changes in our day-to-day lives to be better guardians for these endangered species and help out animals that are having a tough time out in the wild. So what we're going to be talking about today is the big issue of wildlife smuggling, which is also sometimes called wildlife trafficking or the illegal wildlife trade. So different things that can be smuggled or trafficked in and out of countries. Sometimes it's things like animal parts or bones, skins, tusks and horns, but also sometimes animal eggs or even live animals themselves that get trafficked. So this involves sneaking either these parts or the animals themselves through security at the airport, getting them onto an airplane, and then when they have reached their destination, selling them on the black market or selling them illegally for profit or for money. This bag isn't really full of money. I wish it was. But the ways that animals are often transported during this time is sometimes really, really cruel and dangerous for the animal. One way is by sewing eggs or even live animals into clothing. So this is a vest that has little pockets sewn into it, and the pockets are the right size and shape for eggs. But also animals could also be sewn into clothing and smuggled. I've seen photos of lizards that have been put inside of plastic tubes or wrapped in aluminum foil and shoved inside of toilet paper tubes. Turtles covered in duct tape. These animals that are being trafficked are not being looked after well. And then if they do survive, they've been brought over illegally. They obviously haven't had their proper vet checks, so they might not be healthy. They could be carrying disease. They're probably going to be sold to somebody who is not necessarily going to be looking after them very well. So people who are buying these animals might not be the most responsible pet owners. But again, it can be quite profitable. In fact, the illegal wildlife trade is the third biggest black market behind guns and narcotics. So unfortunately there is money to be made, but it's at the cost of taking animals from the wild, from their home, smuggling them in horrific conditions that they may or may not survive. And then you've also removed that animal from the wild, so from that habitat. So it's reducing the number of animals in the wild. It's a big issue for Australian wildlife because Australia is a country with so much unique wildlife. A lot of the reptiles, so snakes, lizards, and also birds such as parrots that are native to Australia are very popular as pets overseas. And wildlife traffickers have realized that. They've realized that there is a market for it. So the how and the why, we've kind of talked about the how with sometimes sewing animals into clothing or hiding them in suitcases. And the why is pretty simple. It's money. It's all about the cash that can be made. So sometimes these animals are sold to be pets. Sometimes they can be sold for food to be eaten. If it's something like an elephant tusk or a rhino horn, that can sometimes be a thing that people will make like food or medicine out of, which is a bit silly because did you know that a rhinoceros horn is made out of the same thing as your fingernails? So sometimes people will grind up rhinoceros horn and use it in medicine or eat it because they think it gives them some kind of strong powers. It's basically the same thing as chewing your fingernails, which is just ridiculous. But also maybe just like a trophy or a prize or something to have in your house to say, ooh, look at this cool thing that I have. So that could be a thing as well. Maybe, I don't know, trophy or decoration. So, how could we make decisions in our lives to impact this? I think a really obvious one would be to not buy an animal that has potentially been brought into the country or taken out of the wild and is being sold illegally. So if you do want to buy a pet and you want to have, say, a pet lizard, in Australia you do have to have a special license to be a pet owner of a reptile. And then there's a lot of considerations as well. You need to make sure you're getting that reptile, that lizard, from a reputable source, maybe a breeder who is looking after those animals really, really well. Or maybe you could even adopt a reptile from the RSPCA or from an animal shelter, because it's not just dogs and cats that can be up for adoption as well. So if you are going to have an animal as a pet, like a snake, a lizard, a parrot, make sure that you are being responsible in how you get that animal, and then of course making sure that you've done your research and you know what needs to be done to take care of that animal and to give it the best possible life that you can. So buy responsibly. There's also a little thing called supply and demand. That means if there is no demand for these animals that have been smuggled, then there won't be any money to be made. If people don't want to buy them, smugglers will realize, this isn't going to make me any money, and will hopefully stop doing it. So if you do buy an animal that isn't from a very good source, you're basically giving money to that person, and they're going to just keep doing it. So if we can make sure we're not supporting it, that's a big one. I think another one that we could be aware of as well is maybe at the airports. This isn't really something that necessarily we can do, but maybe when you get a little bit older and you can start to vote and make important decisions about things like that, we can vote for harsher penalties for people who do get caught at the airport smuggling wildlife, or more enforcement, more security at the airport to make sure that this doesn't happen. But I think if there are harsher penalties, if people know that if they get caught doing this, they are going to get in a lot of trouble, then that could also help to discourage them as well. So, harsher penalties. And more security. Now you can also just keep an eye out, and if you do see something, if you notice something, maybe you're, I don't know, at the markets or something, you see somebody who's maybe selling an animal for pets, and it doesn't look like those animals are being very well looked after, or you notice somebody trying to maybe sell some animals online. If you are concerned about the welfare of those animals, you can also call up and report them and have somebody maybe come and look into it a little bit more to make sure that that person is doing the right thing. So those are little things that we can also do. So we are going to meet an animal shortly that is one of the most frequently trafficked animals out of Australia. It's a type of lizard that has become quite sought after on the black market, and unfortunately it has impacted their numbers in the wild. We are joined now by a really cool lizard. His name is Draco, and Draco is a bearded dragon. Now the reason they're called a bearded dragon is because they've got all those spikes around the neck, around the bottom of the jaw. And if they are threatened, or if they want to look extra big and scary, they can lift up their head, and the skin underneath the chin goes from this light kind of creamy color to black. It turns black to make them intimidating. Now lizards like Draco, bearded dragons, as well as other types of lizards that are common here in Australia like blue-tongue lizards, are really popular pets overseas. Bearded dragons can make really excellent pets, same with other lizards as well. But unfortunately, it has meant that they get smuggled a lot out of Australia. In fact, a lizard such as a bearded dragon or a blue-tongued lizard can be worth up to around $4,000 on the black market. And that often involves smugglers or traffickers going out into their habitat and taking that lizard from their habitat. So for Draco, he would live out in the desert. You can probably tell by his awesome scales, his colors, which would give him really good camouflage out there. Ooh, you can get a really good view of his spiky beard right now. And can you see that hole on the side of his head? That is his ear. Oh, check it out, he just stuck out his little tongue. Oh, looks like he's about to go on the move. But you can see his little ear hole there. Something cool about lizards and their ear holes is they actually have a little scale inside of the ear that can trap any dirt or sand that might accidentally get in there. And then when they shed their scales, that little ear scale pops out as well. It keeps dirt from going into their heads. Now again, we can help put a stop to this illegal trafficking of wildlife by making sure that if you are going to buy a pet, you do your research, only get pets from a responsible source, someone who's looking after them, make sure it's nice and healthy, has had its proper vet checks, and then make sure that you've got the setup to look after that pet and make sure you take good care of it, you know what it needs to eat, you know how you need to keep it, and then you can be a responsible pet owner and maybe have a cool pet like a bearded dragon just like Draco.